Okay, without further ado, it's my absolute pleasure this evening to introduce Gabrielle Fitzpatrick slash Gabby Rooney. A real that's just your whole name now, Gabby. a,
Yes, yes, I love it.
a true trailblazer in the spirits industry as the youngest woman to create, launch, and build a nationally distributed, award-winning tequila ready-to-drink brand. Gabrielle led Damn Right Cocktails expansion across 10 US markets. This is absolutely incredible, Gabby. Under her leadership, the brand experienced remarkable growth from 0 to 150% month on month in just 2.5 years. Guys, I just need to underscore that headline there. 2.5 years is nothing. That is no time at all. The first year, you're just figuring things out. So that is absolutely phenomenal. Gabby also raised over 600K in dollars USD in capital and successfully navigated a roll-up acquisition by a US-based portfolio company where she now serves as Chief Revenue Officer. Gabby's entrepreneurial journey doesn't stop there. She's also ventured into the wellness industry with the launch of a wellness-focused e-com underwear brand, which I hope that we get some time to dive into as well, because that sounds super interesting. Can we get a round of virtual applause? Ladies and gentlemen, please send the flowers and the emoji of appreciation to Gabby. Woo!
Thank you. Thank you for that amazing introduction. Wow. I really appreciate it. And firstly, if my internet is a little off, a little spotty, I apologize. It's amazing to see everyone from all across the world, really. But I really appreciate the introduction, and I'm here to hopefully inspire and enlighten all you hopeful founders and entrepreneurs, and not hopeful. I mean, you're doing the thing, right? So thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Gabby. All right. So, a lot of talking from me at the start while I welcome everyone and do your intro. That's going to be the most that everyone's going to hear from me as we put the spotlight over onto you. So, Gabby, let's start from the beginning. What was the genesis for the idea of Damn Right Cocktails? And I've definitely got to know, for one, where did the name come from?
That's a good question. Well, I guess I'll start really from the beginning. But I'm born and raised in Southern California. I'm actually here now. But I went to school out on the East Coast, so Boston. I went to Boston College. And while I was there, I took a hobby of bartending. And I loved bartending, and um, I love making health forward products, more so something that was, female forward. And I liked experimenting with tequila. So, long story short, I graduated from school. I ended up going into the corporate world and found myself very uninspired in the corporate world, much like a lot of us entrepreneurs. I didn't see a future because I wanted to just kind of create and innovate, and ultimately led to, well, at that point it was the pandemic, and so I got laid off of my corporate job, and I thought, why not a better time to start something on my own? And my passion really was, you know, creating cocktails and making something that was unlike anything out there on the market. And what I found through my many hours of free time in COVID and quarantine, as we all had, was that there was a serious gap in the market. Specifically, in the U.S. market, it's very different from, you know, market or any other markets, but in North America, in the US, there were no organic tequila canned cocktails. And actually, in the entire world, there were none of them. So I set out to create it, and I was very naive. I mean, I didn't know anything, about the canned cocktail space. What I knew was as a consumer myself. And so I set out to launch it, and people thought I was crazy, but I ultimately ended up. I said, I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to stop until it's created and it's built. And so you ask about the name of Damn Right and the genesis behind the brand, because really, what I'm building is not just a canned cocktail company; it is a brand, right? And I wanted it to be something that spoke to me and what I saw a gap in the tequila tequila space, which was this bold millennial woman who's not afraid to maybe curse or have tattoos or just be the alternative to a tequila beverage out there, because in US it was a lot of male influenced, or the female cowgirl or the beachgoer. I wanted this city goer. I wanted someone who was damn right. And that's where the brand comes from. But I'll stop there.
Amazing. Yeah, Gabby,
I'll
thank
let
you
you
so
ask
much.
more questions.
I appreciate that. I feel like your Wi-Fi is also deciding when you might want to take a break. You're with us, you're with us. It's all good, it's all good. And I really appreciate you taking a breather there, because
Okay.
I've
Okay.
already got a few questions that I want to ask you. So I'm really pleased to just dive in here. All right, one question I need to ask you is, what advice can you give our one day community, our listeners on the podcast, regarding the difference between there being a gap in the market versus there not being any other competition for a reason? Do you get what I mean with that?
A gap in the market. Yeah, no, of course. I totally understand what you're saying. My advice that I always give to founders is figuring out if there is, and I hope this answers the question, but if there is something that a consumer views as a problem, or rather a need. So, obviously I built a tequila company, so it's not necessarily a need, but and this is a really good, kind of answers some of your questions, because like there there is a gap where something doesn't exist. Obviously, that's like a good defining word, but it's also something that you see there is a possibility in someone who has done it before. But it's also about iterating and creating and building. And so what I tell my hopeful founders, my hopeful entrepreneurs, is really asking consumers what they want. And so my years as a bartender, I asked consumers, what do they want, what do they need? And it's more so providing a solution to that need that the consumer wants. And it could be anything, right? With an app, finding, a open table. I always use open table as a good example, because it's a reservation platform to provide consumers with a reservation. It's that gap and that need was there, and that solved that solution. So, like one of the founders is creating a lactose-free milkshake. There is a gap in the milkshake industry, because there is no lactose-free milkshake that provides consumers something that they're looking for and they're needing. So I hope that solves or rather answers your question.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, Gabby. And I think, just to kind of summarize my sort of key takeaways from that fantastic answer, is competition existing can serve as a shorthand validation. When it's not there, you need to back it up by that customer demand. You can't simply say, oh, no
Right.
one else is doing this, therefore there must be a gap in the market. No, sometimes there isn't competition for a reason. So linked to that, Gabby, on the customer validation front, you mentioned your bartending role. How much of that did you use to leverage to get in front of customers and conduct some form of market research, interviews while you were bartending, versus making the mistake that you think you are your own customer? Like, I want to kind of get
Yeah.
a good understanding, right? Because it's like, it's kind of spoken about like it's a mistake to think that you're the customer, but actually more often than not, you as the entrepreneur have experienced that pain point yourself personally. So I'd love to hear more
Right.
about that story with your bartending experience and getting that customer validation.
It is a mistake to create a business or create a product based off of your own needs, because what you see is not necessarily what the mass consumer sees. A successful consumer product is something that really is what a majority of consumers need. And so, it was very, very different, and it was such a difficult transition to realize that, okay, most consumers don't necessarily care about what I care about, right? And so as a bartender, I saw that gap, right? I saw that gap, and I validated the product itself from that gap, but it also was a constant marketing tool to use for me as an entrepreneur. But you have to go a step further and you have to show that, okay, consumers actually care about X, Y, and Z. And what I found is that because there was no organic tequila canned cocktails, it didn't mean that consumers cared about that, right? And what I'm doing now is I'm actually using the knowledge of the past few years to reformulate and recreate, or not recreate, but refine my brand. Because what I found is that people actually don't really care, or rather, the consumers don't really care about the organic piece. Most consumers do not. So it's just an added value add of my product that I was the first organic tequila canned cocktail. But what consumers do care about, and what I found in my market research, was that consumers want something that is great tasting, something that is premium and high in ABV. So they could get a little buzz on. And so I used that knowledge from the past few years to refine my brand and actually reformulate. And under this new portfolio company, we're relaunching these products. So you bring up a very good point, because it's really, you'll find these things and you can't be afraid to iterate and rebrand or reformulate or do all these things, because the consumer is constantly changing. And so it's really important for you to listen to the consumer.
Yeah, that is so exciting. I love that. And those insights that you gathered from that customer research piece, I just popped in the chat. It's similar with sustainability. We found a lot when it comes to fashion as well. There's a lot of that.
Mm.
It's kind of a nice to have, and what I've definitely found in my market research experience is what people say versus what they do are very often two different things. And we always like to think of ourselves, maybe this is a bit
Right.
of a British diplomatic kind of thing, right? But maybe we want to sort of put ourselves in the best light possible. So we want to say we care about sustainability, we care about the organic element of the drink, but actually the truth is I want something that tastes good, I want something that I'm going to get the buzz off, and cool, if it has
Yep.
all these extra benefits, then like great. So I love that. Gabby, what I want to double, right?
Exactly.
Sorry, I was just going to say, did you want to expand on that, or are you
Yes.
happy to move on to the next question?
No. You can move on to the next question.
Sorry, the flow is a little bit compromised with the connection here, so apologies if I'm talking over you or you think I'm interrupting. So the other thing I just wanted to double click on
No.
before we kind of progress to the next chapter with Damn Right, I have to, oh, it's such a great name. I love that. I love even just saying it out loud, right? Like Damn Right, I love it. Where did that drive come from with you? Because it's something that really comes across as I'm listening to you, how you recount the story. It's of course so embedded in the DNA, it's in the name, like Damn Right Cocktails. And of course, you mentioned it's such a male dominated industry. So you clearly have that entrepreneurial determination. Where did that come from for you on a deeper kind of level personally?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I, you know, I believe that not everyone is meant to do this. I talk often with my family about this, because obviously my siblings are, we're all very different. We're all very different. And I say, not everyone's meant to do this, but I believe that I am just someone who is very impatient, and I am also very driven by just having uh I think having results is the best way to describe it. Like I'm very oriented. I'm very result oriented. But what I've learned about myself also is that I have a lot of ideas and I get distracted very easily. But having the focus and having patience and drive and resilience is really important. And you know what I've also found, and what's really important that I want to share with entrepreneurs that are listening right now, is that when I first started this, I defined my success by the numbers by the dollars and the monetary aspect of it. But being an entrepreneur does not equate to being wealthy. It's not at all. That's not what it is. And so I quickly realized that, and I shifted and defined but it took me a while, and I was really kind of upset with myself because I, damn right, didn't make a lot of money. It wasn't about the money, right? It was about the results oriented. And so I shifted my success. I had to redefine my success. And that is where my drive is really pushing myself forward. And redefining success is very difficult, but it's ultimately what has led me to build these other products and be successful, quote unquote, in the world of tequila and whatnot. But yeah, I think it's just innate in me, and I'm really grateful. But also, it's a lot of work, but it's exciting for me because I love doing what I do.
So I have to ask, what is redefined success for Gabby?
Very good question. I think the best thing there's that phrase, quality versus quantity. There's a really good book called E-Myth, and it kind of talks about transitioning from, or the roles of the entrepreneur versus the task doer. And so for so long, I was a solo entrepreneur and I was the task doer. And it was so frustrating because I couldn't focus on the big picture. And once I've kind of took a step back and focused on the quality versus the quantity, it really helped me understand what my success on a daily or on a weekly basis looks like. Because for some days it's, you have one meeting and then you're doing a bunch of emails, but then other days it's like I'm making all these sales. I raised $50,000, and it's a crazy thing, but it's taking a step back and kind of realizing that it is the goal in mind and hitting those goals. And so for me, it's always about goals and figuring out, but it's small goals. So I start with small goals. I'm like, okay, make 20, sell 20K or whatever of X, Y, and Z this quarter, raise 50K or whatever. And if I meet those goals, that's great. Or it's amazing, but it's also about taking the steps to get to that goal. And so I think it's different for every person. Success is different for every person, but for me, detaching myself from the dollars and the money is what worked.
Super interesting. I love that, Gabby. And thank you so much for the book
Yeah.
recommendation to the community. I am already adding it to my Goodreads as we speak. Can I just double check? Is this by Michael E. Gerber? Does that ring any bells as the author? Is that the right one?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Amazing. Cool. I
Yes.
love that.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So let's move things forward in the damn right story. So, what was the first milestone for you? Did you get the drinks into bars, into stores? What was the first kind of like, oh my God, okay, it's out there, it's real, this is happening?
Right. Well, so I formed the LLC in like end of 2020, and it took 9 months to actually create the brand because we work with Mexico because it's an authentic tequila. And so I think the first thing that was like, oh my gosh, this is really happening, was when we actually got the product in our hand. Because it took so long, and it was kind of a leap of faith with our, and that was during COVID. And so we couldn't really travel that much. It was, funds were tight. And so I just had this, I put this blind faith in our manufacturer, and luckily I was correct in his abilities. And so having that can in my hand was amazing. And then obviously launching it, but launching the product was very anticlimactic because you don't, in America, like we have this 3-tier system. And so in order to sell to anyone, you have to have a distributor. So it's very, very, very complex in order to get the product in stores. And so I had to physically sell door to door these products. And it was very anticlimactic. And I was like, this is a really hard thing, and a lot harder and a lot more laborious than I anticipated. And so I think the biggest thing was obviously getting the cans, getting the physical product. And then going on that first sales trip and being like, oh my gosh, this is real. And now I have to work my butt off.
Oh my God. Clarify this three-tier
Yeah.
system. It's something I haven't heard of before. Obviously, it was a shock to you when you first discovered this. What are these three different tiers?
Yes. So in the US, like I was saying, we cannot sell direct to consumer. I don't know any other countries. It's very different. I think in the UK it's very different, but in the US we have to sell through distributor in order to sell anywhere. So the first step is kind of getting that distribution to sign you on, and that is very difficult to do as well. But it's kind of like an agent, I guess, but they're really a pass through entity to actually be able to sell because they have all the legal requirements needed. And then every single state has representation. So those 10 markets, which is when I say 10 markets, I mean 10 states. So every state I went into, I had to get distribution. So that's like we're basically tier, that's the first tier. And then then you can sell to the bars, to the liquor stores, to the retailers, and then the consumer buys it. So
And
it was, not only was I, yeah, go ahead.
sorry. So the third tier is really only accessed essentially via, so it kind of trickles down to the consumer, right? Through those methods. Did you need to prove
Correct.
anything? Did you need to go armed with any other metrics to the distributors? Did they need to see anything from you?
Yes, yes, definitely. It was a presentation. It was essentially just pitching yourself. Luckily, like in a lot of industries, it's like who you know and whatnot. And we had a really great broker, I guess you could. That's what they kind of are called, who connects you with distributors, and they kind of vouch for you and say, Gabby just started this, and this is this brand, and it's the first organic, and so it was a very pitchy kind of thing, and you have to prove yourself to them. Sometimes it takes a year, sometimes it takes 3 months, sometimes it takes 16 months. Like it's a very difficult process, and it's getting even harder.
So it sounds like this is the best possible example of it's not what you know, it's who you know. It sounds like it's very much the contacts, the connections, the agents getting you into the distributors.
Right, exactly. And like this industry in the US, like there's so many brands, and it is very saturated is the term that everyone uses. Oh, it's so saturated. You hear that a lot in the consumer goods world, which is true, but like yeah, so it's very difficult for people to respond. And if you're just starting out, like, I didn't know anyone. And so it was really a challenge. But ultimately, people um, put their faith in me, and I'm forever grateful for that.
That's amazing. So, given you don't have any traction at this early stage because you can't sell direct to consumer, you need the distributor and the agent to be able to unlock the retail routes, either through the bars or the liquor stores. So, what can you lean on? What are the magic ingredients that get the distributor to sign you?
Just proving that you are determined to sell this brand, and you will work as hard as you can to ensure that that product is getting on the shelf and then flying off the shelf, right? Because it's about ensuring that like you can get accounts so the liquor stores can buy your product, but also that the consumer's gonna buy it. So it's showing your marketing, it's showing that you're going to be physically in the market. That's like a very important thing, and you're going to support the distributor as much as possible to ensure that your product is moving, because the most important thing is getting those reorder rates, and it's like spins data is what it's called, but getting those reorder rates and ensuring that the product is moving is the number one. So it's like a symbiotic relationship, I
Yeah.
guess.
Right. Okay. And it sounds as though really like painting the picture, really selling the dream is crucial here as well, right? Because you don't have any traction, you don't have any metrics. So it's very much, yeah, selling in the dream to the distributors, right?
Yes,
And I
yes,
imagine, does it
yes,
then get
absolutely.
Does it then get you, once you've signed, I imagine the first one is near impossible because you haven't really got anything to back up. It's purely on how you can sell, how you can sell in the dream. I imagine once you at least get that first one over the line, that at least does provide you with some sort of traction, some sort of proof, some sort of metric that you can then take to the others. Would that be fair to say, or was it still
Yes.
really tough to sign on the next however many distributors?
Yes, it is fair to say, and what I can, and I made a few mistakes in the beginning. I made a lot of mistakes, as I'm still making mistakes. But what I can say is, like, for anyone who's trying to start a beverage, well, in this specific case, or actually just any consumer goods, pick in what I'm doing now as we're relaunching the brand and doing all these things and relaunching new products. Pick 10 to 15 stores and really focus on those stores and really support them and show the store owner that you're there, once a week, saying, hey, how's the product? Is it moving? What can I do to support and ensure that the product is selling, and continue to have this repetition of selling, and that is the way to prove yourself. It doesn't matter. Start small. You can even pick 5 stores. Start small and really put all your energy into those 5 to 15 stores and prove that, to the next distributor or to the next 10 stores, that you know what you're doing and you're getting that reorder rate and you're getting the product on the shelf than off the shelf, because that's the most important thing.
That is such a fantastic tip, Gabby. I absolutely love that. I think that loads of us fall into a similar trap of just like, well, like turning your
Right.
wheels and kind of go off in lots of different directions, whereas actually hone it in, be really strategic about it, really build up your case, really gather all those proof points with a select few that you can then take to unlock the next level. All right, so while we're still in this chapter of your statewide expansion, what was your kind of biggest surprise in that process?
There's so many surprises, but I think honestly, the difficulty of actually getting on shelves, and because you think when you're building a product, you think, oh, everyone's gonna love it, this is great, especially a product that is like a tequila, like you're like, oh, everyone's gonna love this is great. But I realized, like, as I was going across the country selling from St. Louis to like San Antonio, it was really, really challenging to get people to purchase my product. And I think it was just a matter of marketing and like showing them, and really just like kind of hand selling the product. And so I learned that, and that was ultimately what allowed me to expand and be successful in certain markets, was because I was willing to go out there physically and hand sell the product and do tastings and be the salesperson that I know I am, and really showing that this product is good and you should try it.
I love that. I love that. The obvious follow-up question here is how on earth do you scale founder-led sales? So I totally get how you get that cut through, especially somebody like you as well, with your energy, your drive. It's your baby as well, right? So you can sell in that vision. But as this is expanding and going to more states and spreading across the country, how do you scale that, and what other marketing channels worked when you couldn't physically be there to sell it in person?
Yes, that's a very good question, because and I don't recommend expanding super quickly, because it's really difficult to manage it all, for sure. And so I used a formula, and it's kind of talking on what I said before about the 10 to 15 stores. And so I chose those 10 to 15 stores, and really ensured that my reorder rate was around 50%. And once I was had a consistent reorder rate among those stores, then I gave myself the opportunity to expand. And it was also the expansion, and so then, just talking about that, it was the stores ensuring that really good reorder rate, then moving on to the next and using that data points to the next distributors or the next markets, and showing, look, I did this in this market and I can replicate it in the other market. So that was formula And it's quite simple once you think of it, but obviously getting to that point is really difficult. And I think also what I was going to say about expansion, it was also like strategic because trying to find a markets that really, took off, and there were pockets of the country where my brand was really successful. And it's kind of funny because it would be like these most random places, but people really enjoyed it in those random places. But I just, to summarize, I think just sticking to a formula and proving that you can replicate that small um, strategy elsewhere is super, super key.
Amazing. I love that. And isn't it amazing, like those random findings that we would never have expected before, right? Whether it's these towns that we probably never even heard the name of, or some of the feedback we get from customers. It's
Yeah.
so fun. It's all fun, part of the journey. But I'm going to move things along because I've got two main sort of chunky questions that I want to ask you as well. Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, please drop in any questions for Gabby in the chat so that we can come around to those in the live Q&A towards the end here. So Gabby, all right, so getting back to this part in the story. So you're getting that traction. It's all very exciting. It's hard work. You're learning things the hard way, making mistakes, readjusting. At which point in this journey did you then decide to go out and get external capital? And what was the rationale behind that? Why did you think you needed that boost in capital?
Yeah. Well, the alcohol industry is very expensive. Building a consumer product is expensive. I mean, doing any kind of thing that has a physical product to it is really expensive. And I, as an entrepreneur, and I say this to a lot of founders, you have to be able to put yourself out there and know that raising capital is a part of the job as a CEO, founder, whatever it may be, entrepreneur. You have to be able to raise capital in whatever you're doing. I mean, if you have the opportunity to not raise capital, that's great too. But so what I did in the beginning is we knew, I knew exactly like how much I needed, but I definitely underestimated it. So I raised about like 400K before the launch. And then as I was building it, I raised an additional like 200K to support the growth and expansion. But I also knew that like I didn't want just um, money. Like I wanted strategic capital as well. And that is super important to understand. Like getting a check is great, but there's responsibilities with that check. And so getting a check that it also has someone who can help and provide, maybe mentorship or advice or even a role in the company is even better. And so every time I raised capital, it was more of a strategy behind building the brand, but I also didn't really raise that much comparative to all the other brands. I didn't have a large marketing budget, and that was on purpose, and because I didn't want to raise an insane amount of money and have all this responsibility and loans essentially. But it was necessary for me. There was no other option. I couldn't fund it myself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And honestly, like without having a huge amount of knowledge about the investing space in America and the drinks market, the 600K like didn't look like a huge number to me. So I think kudos to you as well. There's so much research that backs up how much more efficient female founders are with their money as well. I just have to put that out there. It's been proven time and time again that we can do much more with much less. And Gabby, I
Yes.
think that you back up that really, powerful statistic as well. So it was quite early in the journey. That makes a ton of sense. It's a physical product. It's quite expensive. Who did you turn to for funding? Like I'm very much in the tech world, so that's very much VCs. Who are the sort of people that would back this early stage, first time female founder setting up to launch a drinks brand?
Right. Great question. And unfortunately, the VC space was not an option for me. And it's really quite sad because, less than, I think the stat is crazy. It's like less than 2% of women get VC funding. And, I still reach out to VCs. I mean, right now I'm fortunate that I don't have to, but VCs were really not an option. They didn't look at me. They said, no way, we're not investing in alcohol, or you're way too early for us. And so it was really, that was really a sad reality. And so I raised all my money from, it was a full-time job, and it was really, really difficult to find investors. I was fortunate enough that, like, I went to Boston College, and there was a huge community of, hope or people investing in female entrepreneurs, and I tapped into that network and that community a lot, and I just applied to every like pitch competition, everything. I was reaching out to people on LinkedIn. It's a lot of work, and it is really difficult. And so raising and I also crowdfunded a little bit, but it was difficult for me, and raising that 600K was like blood, sweat, and tears.
Oh my
Every
God.
dollar was, yeah, it was a lot.
You
And
worked
so
for it.
hopefully, but yeah, that's my answer. I mean, it was really a lot of, it was really challenging.
And forgive my ignorance, do these investors still fall into the VC category when they're backing a drinks business? Or what would you label those investors?
Angel investors. All of my investors were angel investors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, amazing. So combination of angel investors and crowdfunding was how you managed to secure the total of the
Yes.
600 to get the business going. All right, Gabby, I have to hear about your next business here. Tell us about Cuffed. And I'm going to connect the two in a minute, but let's hear the elevator pitch first.
Yes. Yes. So Cuffed is a women's hypoallergenic underwear. It's made of 100% tencel, which is tencel fibers. And this underwear was actually, the brainchild of it was my mother. She said, Gab, I want to create this, because she had this like, she was in Africa, and she was wearing disposable underwear because she was on safari, and she couldn't throw the underwear away because it said it was disposable, but it wouldn't compost and biodegrade, and Africa is very particular when it comes to their environment, and they have really high standards. And so my mom said, I want to create a fully compostable underwear, and so we did it, and it's on the market right now. And that's a very different business. I spend a few hours, or probably 10 hours a week running that, but I have a whole e-commerce team that runs it. And it's a really, really cool product, and I see a huge future with it. We'll see. I don't know. It's very different from the alcohol industry for sure.
Well, I love that you just mentioned that, Gabby, because my final question from me, I can see one or two questions coming in the chat. So please, audience, please send in any more that you've got for Gabby in just a second. But what I wanted to wrap up here was connecting the two is you just mentioned how different, how wildly different these two businesses are, completely different categories. What top 1 to 3 things are you taking from your experience with Damn Right into Cuff?
Well, that's really easy to answer, and it's what we talked about in the beginning, and it's about what the consumer wants. And I said to my mom when she had this idea, I said, I will help you create this, but I can't guarantee that like it's going to be successful, because we need to do a lot of market validation. And so she was like, okay, let's spend 9 months doing market validation. So it was a lot of surveys, and ensuring that we are creating a product that not just for us, right? It's not just for us, it's for the consumer. And we had to pivot, and we had to adjust, and really kind of hone in on our actually value propositions to see exactly what the consumer wanted. So there was a lot of iteration that came with creating Cuffed, and I learned that from Damn Right. It's what the consumer wants. It's not what I want, or what the investors want. It is what the consumer wants, and that's what we built. We built something that the consumers needed and the consumers want.
I love that. I love that. Perfect final pearl of wisdom to drop with the audience here this evening. So I love that we kind of ended the proper interview on that note. Fantastic. All right, let's look at the questions that we've got from the audience. So I think the first one here was from Ken, who's interested in your first order. Oh my God, Ken, this is a great question. What was the volume and how did you fund it? Yeah, so you're talking about the financial barrier. Okay, so obviously we talked about your fundraising, Gabby, but yeah, anything else you want to answer on that one?
Yes. And so I believe that he's asking about my first order from the distributor, because that's, you know, how the three-tier system works. It's not from, I just want to clarify that first order is from the distributor. Then we obviously sell from the distributor to the liquor store and whatnot. And he's talking about like the MOQ with the manufacturers is a very good question. So my first order was just a pallet. So it's 100 cases, which is quite a lot, but I guarantee you that's kind of the industry standard. Distributors are going to ask for probably one pallet, and so it's about and then it took me like probably that was 100 cases, so it took maybe a quarter, so 3 months to sell those 100 cases. But what we did with our because he's talking about his manufacturer, so what we did is we started with the lowest MOQ, which was 1,000 cases to order from our manufacturer. Then we housed it in a warehouse, and then we would sell, you know, the pallets to the distributors. But what I recommend, Ken, is starting as small as possible, because what you don't want to do is have all of, and what happened to me is that I had all this extra inventory that expired. And so we had to end up throwing out some of the inventory away. So what I recommend is going as small as possible with whatever you're building, so that you can support the cash flow, because he says the financial barrier is very high. I totally get that. So going as small as possible, then scaling. The scaling is the most difficult part, but scaling as slowly as you can. And again, I'm happy to talk offline about this, because there's so much to discuss.
Fantastic, Gabby. I love that really sensible, sound answer that you give there. And I think it's also just a really important message to underscore in our day and age of venture-backed, high growth, scale ups to these dizzy heights of unicorn status. There is so much of this glitz and glamour of chasing something that actually, like, the reality is quite different to what I think a lot of you would
Yes.
imagine, you know, from the press. And so that kind of slow and steady, build it up, like, I think is fantastic. All right, great question, Ken. Thank you so much for that. Davida, she asked, how many pitch decks did you have, and how many pages were each, if more than one? I love that, getting really into the nitty gritty there. Thank you, Davida.
That's a great question. I only had one pitch deck, and it was probably 12, it's probably 12 pages. But the thing about that is that I was constantly iterating and constantly adding metrics and editing it, because it's, you know, your business is ever changing, so the pitch deck should be ever changing. But having one for investors is the most important thing, because you want to be able to really know everything about that pitch deck from like the back of your hand. Any question that's asked, you want to be so comfortable with it. So having one pitch deck is really important. But I also had a brand deck, but that's for retailers. So that is very different from, you know, raising capital. But my brand deck was more so just about the brand in general, and, you know, metrics and whatnot. But as far as investors go, one pitch deck, stick to it, know it really well, and clear and concise.
Love that. I totally agree with that. Fantastic. All right, we don't have any more questions, so I'm going to scoot on over to the quiz as the final section of today's interview. So please have a scan of this QR code on the screen. I'm going to pop a link in the chat as well. And Gabby, you and I are going to play a bit of elevator music while we give our audience a couple of minutes to answer the questions. And then I would love for you to reveal the answers. So let's give them all just a few moments. Okay, I think that's giving them enough time. All right, Gabby, the answer to the first question. Could you hear the music coming through, by the way? I'm never sure if it's coming through.
I couldn't hear it.
Okay, all right, I need to figure that out then. Okay, I was just playing some elevator music, but obviously that was for my pleasure only. All right, first question, Gabby, what was the most surprising challenge about starting an alcohol brand? Was it A, the complexities of the three-tier system, B, the regulatory compliance, or C, brand differentiation?
A.
It was
It was
A.
A.
Three-tier system. I feel like we all learn a lot with that, with that part of the story, which is really interesting. Gabby, next question. The top lesson from the statewide expansion of Damn Right, was it your reorder rate when you're building a consumer products brand? Was it your supply chain management, or was it your local market adaptation?
The reorder rate.
Fantastic. Option A
A.
again. All right. Well done, everyone. We hope that you've got the answers correct. Please do leave us your feedback as well as part of that final page on the feedback form there. As always, if you have any more questions for Gabby, you can find her in the community Slack channel. She's also just very generously shared her direct email on the chat there as well. So if anyone prefers to take a conversation offline and ask her some more one-on-one questions, then you've got that there. Gabby, thank you so much for your time. It's absolutely flown by, and it's been so interesting to learn about your story.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm happy to talk to anyone offline. I love doing this, and there's a lot of good ideas and products that you guys have. So reach out.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Gabby. And join us same time next week, where I'm going to be interviewing Paul Capriolo all about mastering experiments, unleash your inner growth hacker. So scan the QR code on screen. Make sure that you join us for that one. Gabby, once again, thank you so, so much. I have loved this conversation with you. I think everyone has learned at least something new, and I look forward to continuing the conversation on the community channel. Thank you so much.